Alright, so today I wanted to talk about sheens, and sheens are defined by the glossiness of the paint. And sheens can run all the way from flat to a really high gloss paint. Now I'm going to talk about 8 or 9 different kinds of sheens in this. I'll try to make this as painless as possible. But those sheens can be broken down into 4 categories. And those categories are flat, which I'm going to include velvet and matte. Now the velvet and matte finishes that you're going to run across are just a little bit shinier than a flat finish, but they're usually not as high a sheen as the next category, which is eggshell. In eggshell, I'm going to include pearl, satin. Now, you should note here that some manufacturers call their eggshell satin, like Sherwin-Williams, so just be aware of that. When I'm talking about satin during the rest of this video, I'm talking about a higher sheen up, just a little bit shinier than the eggshell finish. Okay, and I'm also going to include low luster. Now, low luster is usually labeled for an exterior paint, but there might be a manufacturer out there that calls their interior stuff, so I'm just throwing it out there. I probably won't mention low luster again. The next category is semi-gloss, and then the final category is gloss. Alright, so let's start with the flat finishes. A flat finish to me can be a very elegant look. It absorbs light as opposed to reflecting light back into the room, because the higher the sheen, the more light will come back off of the wall and back into the room. So the light will absorb back into the color or the wall color. And you can see the true color most of the time, so it creates this really elegant look. It also does a really great job of hiding imperfections. Now they're not going to go away, but they'll be less noticeable than a higher sheen. A higher sheen paint, imperfections will show up more. The major downfall to a flat paint when you're using it on the walls is it's just not durable. And in my experience, not very durable at all. Now you could move to a velvet or matte finish. Personally, I don't like them. I still think you run into the same kinds of problems. If you get them dirty, they're harder to clean. So I recommend if you're going to do walls, you go to an eggshell finish. Okay, so the only time that I use a flat finish is on the ceilings, and I use what's called a true or dead flat. It has like a 1 or 2 degree gloss level. So it's dead flat, so you don't get light reflecting off of the paint. One thing I can't stand is walking into a room that has a shiny ceiling, because I'm easily amused, so when light is shining off the ceiling, I look up, and I don't want to look up. I want to look at the walls. I want to look at everything else. So I don't recommend using a high sheen paint on the ceilings unless it's a high moisture area like a bathroom or a moisture-ridden laundry room. What I really wouldn't recommend, if you decide to go down the flat route, if you're going to get a really dark color, I would not recommend doing it in a flat. So if you touch the walls, what will happen is it will mark the walls. It will create this white mark across the walls, and that mark will be very hard to clean. As a matter of fact, when you go to clean it, it's actually going to make it worse, and it won't go away. So the way to get around that is to increase the sheen or never touch the walls. So here's an example of a fireplace bump out that we did. Now he has a television set that's above the fireplace, and he did not want a shiny paint because he didn't want the light reflecting back into the room. So what we decided to do was do it in a true flat. This is Benjamin Moore's Regal Select Flat. And it's kept up so well. I did this job 4 or 5 years ago, and it's kept up really well because they just don't touch the walls. So that's the key. If you're going to use a flat, especially with a dark color, just be careful about touching the walls. So the next category is eggshell, and eggshell is the sheen of choice for most of my clients. 99% of my clients for all of the walls. It is rare, very rare, that I use a matte, flat, velvet, or semi-gloss on the wall. It is almost always eggshell. I think it's a lower sheen, so you get durability, but it's not so shiny. So I really like the way that it looks. So you could move to a satin finish, or you could move to a pearl finish, which is fine. It's just a little bit shinier. I think they're too shiny for the walls, but it's totally up to you. Again, that's a very subjective statement. So when I do eggshell on the walls, I like to do the next step up, sheen-wise, to do the trim. So in my scenarios, I do flat on the ceilings, eggshell on the walls, and then I'll usually use pearl, satin, or semi-gloss. Now it's rare that I use semi-gloss on the trim, but sometimes clients really want it. They like it to be a little bit shinier. And I never use gloss. I've never used gloss in the trim. It's just a high gloss. It's just too high of a sheen, at least for my clients and for me. The nice thing about the pearl and the satin finishes, because they're not as shiny, again, subjective statement, but because they're not as shiny as the semi-gloss, I think it just creates just a nicer look, a more, I don't know the right word, contemporary. It's something that I really like. I think it just looks really, really nice. Again, subjective, you decide what you want to do. Semi-gloss, the only time I'll use that is on the trim. I'd never use it on the walls. You certainly can. And then for gloss, gloss is the same idea. It is very rare that I use a gloss, but here's an example where we did use a high gloss on the inside of this door. They also have railings going upstairs and downstairs that we did in the same kind of paint. It just adds for a really nice touch. I remember a place that I did many years ago was an old craftsman home, and they had kept the old wood in the house, and we decided to paint the walls a really high gloss red, and even with lath and plaster walls, which then they were really beat up, it looked really great. So it, you know, it brought character to the home. The house was 100 years old, so it just looked really nice. Again, very subjective, but it's rare that I use a high gloss paint. Okay, so in conclusion, flat for me, ceilings only, unless it's a high moisture area. I don't use matte and velvet finishes. If I do, it's very rarely, only if the client calls it out. We usually move to an eggshell finish for all of the walls, and then I'll move up to the next sheen, which would either be satin, pearl, or semi-gloss. Okay? Semi-gloss I only use on the trim, gloss I only use in special occasions. Okay, that's it. I hope this video was helpful. If you liked this video, I hope you'll think about giving me a thumbs up, and if you're not a subscriber, I hope you think about subscribing to my channel. Okay, thanks much.